Do you want to learn how I built this game with nothing but ChatGPT in about an hour? My name is Tyler, and I hope that you'll join me on a journey to make incredible games and apps with AI and learn about game design in the process. Making this game certainly was easier with the help of AI, but there are certain tips and tricks that I'm going to share with you throughout this video that are going to enable you to make better games and apps with AI, and even if you do actually like to manually code as well. Sit back, relax, and watch as I show you what I prompted ChatGPT, how I was able to modify the game even without having to prompt ChatGPT every time, and without having to know a single line of code. So diving into how we actually did this. Well, started with really a simple prompt. And I actually started by giving it images to include in the game itself too. These are live images on a server. What you could do instead is just put them in the same folder with the game. And it reasoned for 12 seconds and it gave this. And so I really just didn't even read it. I just copied it and I made a folder and I made a completely blank file called spaceshipgame.html because this is an HTML file that it coded, and just paste it. Do we have a game? Well, it's certainly something. We've got all the ships that are coming down from the top of the screen, and then my ship is way too big at the bottom, completely off screen. This isn't actually really what I was going for at all. I was wanting something that's going to be in multiple dimensions where you can move around. So went back to ChatGPT and tried to be a bit more clear about what I wanted. I let it know some of the issues that I had. The enemies were facing the wrong way, so just kind of helping it to reorient the images, but also clarify that I want to be able to move in any direction with realistic physics as if they were in space. Now, the player actually is smaller. To be fair, it is smaller, and we can move around in 2 different dimensions. You can go any direction, really. Enemies, though, are still only coming from the top, which is very boring. So going back to ChatGPT, I let it know this looks pretty good, but let's dive deeper. I want a config file. A config file is for you to easily edit certain parameters in the game, certain settings in the game, but you keep it separate from the rest of your code, so you don't have to go digging through lines and lines and lines and lines of code just to find where you can edit a certain number to maybe make the ship shoot faster or maybe make it move faster. You just keep all of those settings in one file, so it's easy to edit the way that the game plays and the way that the game feels. And I find that when I'm working with AI to make games or apps, it's extremely beneficial to have it make a config file so that I don't have to have it make every single change. I can make some of the changes really easily by just literally changing a number. It divided the code into a few different files. An index file, index.html, is just the main web page. Config file is just for those settings and configurations. And then this is the JavaScript that handles the game. And why am I not doing this in an actual development app? Why am I not doing this in VS Code? I literally have VS Code. The reason is to show you that you don't need any of these crazy tools anymore to at least start building. You can start building apps and games just with the basic tools and features that you have on your computer for free. It's absolute insanity. Now when we run the game, we get this, and we're almost to something that's kind of cool, I guess. It's still a little crazy, and so what I did is I went in and edited the config file to see if there's any settings we can change to get it a little closer to what we want. So I'm just going to open the config file with Notepad, and then it's actually really easy to read through. We've got the player and we've got the enemies, and that's pretty much it so far. So the player scale right now is set to 0.3. So if I change that to something like 0.1, and then I just save it and reopen the game, check it out. The player that easily is changed. Did that guy disappear because I shot him? I think so. They all just take one shot right now. The raiders are so big. Let's see what other configs that we can actually mess with. So after messing with the configs a little bit, here we are. The cruisers are supposed to be way bigger, and there's no configs for the rotation of the ships yet, so we need to fix that with the help of ChatGPT. I let it know some of the things that I liked, because sometimes when you start trying to make more changes as your app gets bigger, the LLM will start taking things away that you didn't ask it to take away. So I just sometimes like to let it know, hey, I like this, especially if it added things without me asking that I happen to like. I said I love the direction it's going, but instead of an alert for game over, we should use a screen, its own modal. I'm going to want to add advertisements to the game, a play again button, and then let it know some of the differences that we need to make with the enemies too. Now let's see what we end up with. Well, the enemies are facing the right way, but one thing you'll notice is that even though I changed the config file, everything's back to the same size. And the reason for that is because ChatGPT doesn't know that I changed the config file. So if I wanted it to know, I'd have to feed those new configs into it just so that when it regenerates a new config file, it has all of those changes and edits. There are better ways to go about this. I'm going to show you guys in probably another video. But look at that. We've got our game over screen, a place for us to put an advertisement and a play again button. It even shows our score. And if we play again, it does actually reset the game, which is awesome. But the enemies are facing the right direction. So that's cool. And they do follow me. It's almost kind of creepy. After modifying the config file again, this is what we end up with. It gave me config settings separate for each of the different enemy types, so I was able to just set them as different sizes. We can also set them with different shooting speeds and all of that, and I'll show you how that looks. Here in the config, we've got Marauder, and then we've got this bracket here for the stats for the Marauder, but then we've also got all of that for the Raider. So here's what I said in my next message. I said, hey, I modified the config file with these settings. I like those stats in the feel of the game, and then I said, hey, we need a health bar. We need projectile speed to be constant and not determined by the ship's velocity. Because I don't know if you noticed, whoops, that's not the right one. But if I shoot while I'm not moving versus when I shoot while I'm moving, my projectiles will actually go faster. Like this, watch this. If I'm moving and then I turn around and shoot, then those projectiles, look at the velocity of that projectile. What's going on? So I let it know, we just need that to be constant instead. Let's have enemies spawn a little further outside so that they can't be seen when they spawn. And let's have the mobile version scaled differently. If you want to check out mobile versions, you can just hit Control-Shift-I. There we go. Look, it totally works. Look at that, it loops. I didn't even notice that until now. But yeah, I want the mobile version to scale differently just so that people that are playing on mobile will be able to see more. Now, in this case, it only gave me an edit for the game.js file. So after adding that in, here's what we get. We've got a health bar now. Enemies are spawning still, 2 different types of enemies. Wow, we really have something here. We're on our way to something very interesting. We also added the feature that if your mouse is close to the ship, it'll reverse instead of going forward, which you can use to kind of maneuver around enemies a bit better. Then I let ChatGPT know that I made another small change to the config, and I wanted to add multiple lives. And let's see a score below the health bar. Easy. As you can see, pretty much whenever we prompt ChatGPT to do something specific, then it's just doing it. It's just getting it done. It's remembering the other code, and then it's getting it done. And we're doing all of these prompts with the think feature, with it doing the reasoning and thinking, which helps it to write better code. However, I noticed that when the player dies from a collision, it seems like it is just resetting going into the next life, but if they die from a projectile, the screen's going black. So I just let it know, hey, I want 3 things here. I like to break it up into let it know, hey, here's number 1, here's number 2, here's number 3. I also want it to let me control the spawn rates and the spawn limits so that we can control how many enemies are on the screen and really make sure that we tailor the experience to what's going to feel the best for the player. That's going to take testing, and that needs to be in the config so that we can modify that. And of course, we need a star background. Here's where it gets interesting. I did throw a lot at ChatGPT with that last one. And so after adding in the code, we get a black screen. So with Control-Shift-I and just basically copying this console error message into ChatGPT, ChatGPT was able to look at what the errors are, which it looks like it has something to do with the star background itself. Honestly, adding that whole feature of like the background that's going to be generating stars and everything should have been its own prompt. But after plugging that into ChatGPT, literally just copying and pasting it, then it was able to fix it. This is really turning into a bullet hell game, isn't it? I haven't modified the config for the enemies yet or anything like that, but you can see that we actually lost a life. Now we have 2 lives instead of 3. I just noticed the enemies are appearing over the health bar. We'll deal with that later. Otherwise, everything seems to be functioning really well. So effectively, this is where we're at. If you've made it this far in the video, leave a like and subscribe. I would love for us to be able to grow this into a community and a real club of people who make and play games that are built with the help of AI. I plan to continue to develop this game because it's a lot of fun. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Keep making.